She clutched a crumpled economy ticket in her trembling hand. Her baby bump, a silent testament to a 7-year marriage that felt like a lie. Her millionaire husband, the man who'd once promised her the world, had just condemned her and their unborn child to a grueling 14-hour flight in coach. He called it a necessary cost-saving measure for their expanding empire. She called it a betrayal. But as she stood in the bustling JFK terminal, fighting back tears of humiliation, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. A voice that belonged to her husband's charismatic CEO. What happened next wasn't just a simple upgrade. It was the first thread pulled in an unraveling of secrets, a collision of worlds that would expose a devastating conspiracy far bigger than a plane ticket, and prove that the greatest danger to her and her baby wasn't turbulence, but the man waiting for her back home. The lie Vanessa Rosewood Linwood would later realize hadn't started with the plane ticket. It had started much earlier, woven into the very fabric of her marriage to Dominic Lynwood. It was in the casual way he'd dismiss her concerns, the expensive gifts that always seemed to arrive after a particularly cold argument, and the sprawling, sterile silence of their Manhattan penthouse that overlooked Central Park like a lonely god. Their life to the outside world was an urban fairy tale. Dominic Lynwood was a titan of industry, a self-made millionaire in the cutthroat world of New York real estate development. He was sharp, devastatingly handsome, and possessed an ambition that burned like a forge. Vanessa, with her art history degree and quiet grace, was the perfect counterpart, the beautiful, supportive wife who chaired charities and hosted flawless dinner parties where champagne flowed as freely as conversation about stock portfolios. They were the golden couple, their faces smiling from the glossy pages of society magazines. But the gloss had begun to wear thin. For the past year, Dominic had become distant, a ghost in their own home. He'd returned late, smelling of expensive whiskey and a faint, unplaceable perfume that wasn't hers. His phone, once left carelessly on the nightstand, was now perpetually attached to his hand, its screen angled away from her. When she'd ask, he'd blame the market, a difficult merger, the immense pressure of being Dominic Lynwood. "You wouldn't understand, Vanessa," he'd say, a silken curtain of condescension dropping between them. "Just focus on the upcoming fundraiser. Wear the blue dress. It brings out your eyes." 7 years of marriage had taught her that pressing further was futile. It would only lead to a meticulously crafted argument where he would twist her words, making her feel needy, paranoid, and ultimately ungrateful for the gilded cage he had built for her. The news of her pregnancy should have been the key to unlock a new, happier chapter. She had imagined telling him over a romantic dinner, his cool facade melting away, to reveal the joyful, expectant father beneath. Instead, the reality was as cold as the marble countertops in their kitchen. She found him in his study, a stark, minimalist room dominated by a massive mahogany desk. He was staring at a trio of monitors displaying endless columns of numbers, his jaw tight. "Dominic." She began, her voice a fragile thing in the tense air. She held the positive pregnancy test behind her back like a secret weapon. He didn't look up. "I'm busy, Vanessa. It's important." She took a deep breath. I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The relentless clicking of the stock ticker on one of the screens seemed to mock her. Finally, he swiveled his chair around. There was no joy in his eyes, no surprise. There was only a flicker of something she couldn't name, something cold and calculating. "Okay," he said, his voice flat. Vanessa's heart sank. Okay. That's all you have to say. What do you want me to say? These things happen. He stood up, walking to the wet bar in the corner. He poured himself a generous measure of scotch, deliberately ignoring the fact that she could no longer join him. We'll need to make adjustments. Cancel the charity trip to Africa in your 3rd trimester. I'll have my assistant get you an appointment with Dr. Leonard. He's the best. Handles half the women on the Upper East Side. It was a business transaction, a new project to be managed. There was no we, only you and my assistant. The joy she had carried into the room withered and died. In the weeks that followed, her pregnancy was treated as another item on Dominic's agenda. He never once came to an appointment. When she'd call him, excited to share the news of a first heartbeat or a tiny kick, he'd interrupt with a distracted, "That's great. Honey. Listen, I have to take this call." The only time he showed a sliver of interest was when she mentioned her doctor's initial concerns. "He said I have a marginal cord insertion," she explained one evening, desperate for some connection, "and my blood pressure is a little high. He wants to monitor me closely." He mentioned the term high risk. For the first time in weeks, Dominic looked at her. Truly looked at her. A strange intensity entered his gaze. High risk. What does that mean exactly? What are the dangers? She pathetically mistook his clinical curiosity for concern. He said it increases the risk of complications. Preterm labor, low birth weight. He just said I need to avoid stress and take it easy. Right. Avoid stress. Dominic repeated slowly, the words tasting strange in his mouth. He walked over and placed a hand on her belly, a gesture so uncharacteristic it startled her. His hand was cold. "We'll take care of you. Both of you." It was a week later that he proposed the trip to Paris. He presented it as a baby moon, a last romantic getaway before the baby arrived. He was almost convincing, using a tone of voice she hadn't heard since their courtship. "We need this, Vanessa," he'd said, his eyes feigning sincerity. "Just the two of us. We'll walk along the Seine, eat pastries, forget about everything. I'll clear my schedule. It will be like old times." A fragile hope bloomed in her chest. Maybe this was it. Maybe the reality of fatherhood was finally sinking in, and he was trying to reconnect. She allowed herself to be swept up in the fantasy-spending days, looking at maternity-friendly Parisian boutiques and dreaming of romantic dinners. The illusion shattered 2 days before their departure. Dominic came home, his face a mask of weary regret. "There's a problem," he announced, loosening his tie. "The Singapore deal. It's falling apart. I have to fly there tomorrow. I can't go to Paris." The disappointment was a physical blow. "What, Dominic, you promised? This is $100 million deal, Vanessa. It's our future. The baby's future." He was already in defensive mode. "You should still go. Everything is booked. The hotel, everything. You deserve the break. Go alone." The idea felt pathetic. A pregnant woman on a solo baby moon. "Don't be dramatic. You'll have a wonderful time. Rest shop, get a massage. It'll be good for you." He produced a flight itinerary from his briefcase and handed it to her. "Here are your flight details." She looked down at the paper. Her eyes scanned the text and then scanned it again, certain she was misreading it. Passenger, Vanessa Linwood, Airline Norse Atlantic Airways, Class Economy, Seat 24B. She stared at it, the single line of text feeling like a slap in the face. Economy, 24B. a middle seat on a budget airline for a 14-hour flight from New York to Paris. She, the wife of a man whose net worth was in the 9 figures, who owned a private jet he used for weekend trips to the Hamptons, was being sent to Europe in a middle seat. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice shaking. "This is an economy ticket." Dominic waved a dismissive hand. "The company is in a cost-cutting phase. Every dollar counts. First class is obscenely expensive and, frankly, an unnecessary luxury. It's just a flight, an unnecessary luxury," she repeated, incredulous. "Dominic, you flew to Miami last month for a bachelor party on a private jet." "That was a business expense," he snapped, his patience gone. "This is a personal trip. Besides, it's only for a few hours. You'll survive. People do it every day. People aren't 7 months pregnant with a high-risk pregnancy." The words tumbled out, laced with panic. "The doctor said I need to be able to move around, to elevate my legs to help with the swelling and the blood pressure. A middle seat in economy. Dominic, for 14 hours. Did you even think about that?" "My God, you're being hysterical." He spat, his voice laced with venom. "It's a seat on a plane, not a torture chamber. If your doctor is so concerned, maybe you shouldn't be flying at all. But I thought you wanted to go to Paris." He was twisting it, making it her fault, her desire. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and shameful. It wasn't about the luxury. It was about the blatant, stunning lack of care. It was the complete disregard for her well-being and the well-being of their unborn child. He hadn't just overlooked her comfort, he had actively chosen to deny it. The cost of a first-class ticket was to him the equivalent of loose change. This wasn't about saving money. This was a message. It was a punishment for what she didn't know. "Please, Dominic," she whispered, hating the pleading tone in her own voice. "Please don't make me do this." His face was stone. "The ticket is booked, Vanessa. It's non-refundable. Be at JFK by 7 tomorrow night. A car will take you." He turned and walked back into his study, closing the door behind him. The click of the latch was a sound of finality. She was left standing in the cavernous living room, the useless itinerary trembling in her hand. The view of the glittering city lights, once a symbol of her incredible life, now seemed to mock her, a beautiful, cruel mirage. She looked down at her swollen belly, a fresh wave of fear washing over her. It was no longer just about her humiliation. It was about the tiny, vulnerable life depending on her, a life whose father had just deemed it worthy of nothing more than seat 24B. The next 24 hours were a blur of quiet misery. Vanessa packed her suitcase in a daze, her movements mechanical. Every item she folded: a soft cashmere sweater, a pair of comfortable flats, a book she knew she wouldn't be able to read, felt like an artifact from a different life. A life where this trip was supposed to be a celebration of love, not an exercise in endurance. Dominic was a phantom. He left early in the morning for his alleged trip to Singapore, leaving only a curt note on the kitchen island. "Have a safe flight. Call when you land." There was no "I love you," no apology. The town car arrived at 5 o'clock, as clinical and impersonal as Dominic's note. The ride through Manhattan traffic was suffocating. Every happy couple she saw strolling hand in hand, every advertisement featuring a smiling family, was a fresh stab of pain. By the time she reached the chaotic swirl of John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 7, a knot of anxiety had tightened in her stomach. The North Atlantic check-in area was a stark contrast to the hushed, carpeted lounges she was accustomed to. It was a cacophony of crying children, stressed-out families, and backpackers weighing their luggage with frantic intensity. The queue snaked back and forth in a seemingly endless line. Vanessa, pulling her single suitcase, felt her cheeks burn with a mixture of humiliation and self-pity. She was a Linwood. She didn't wait in lines like this. But here she was, anonymous and miserable, just another face in the crowd. After nearly an hour of shuffling forward, her back aching and her ankles beginning to swell, she finally reached the counter. The agent, a harried-looking woman with tired eyes, barely glanced at her. "Passport and booking reference," she said, her voice monotone. Vanessa handed them over. The agent tapped at her keyboard. "Just the one bag to check." "Yes." "Okay. You're in seat 24B, a middle seat." The agent looked up at Vanessa's prominent baby bump for the first time, a flicker of sympathy in her eyes. "Did you want to see if we can move you to an aisle? It might be more comfortable." Hope, fragile and desperate, fluttered in Vanessa's chest. "Oh yes, please. If there's anything available." The agent tapped again. Her expression fell. "Sorry, ma'am. The flight is completely full. We're oversold, actually. There's nothing I can do." "Nothing at all?" Vanessa asked, her voice small. "I'm sorry." Defeated. Vanessa took her boarding pass, a flimsy piece of paper that felt like a death warrant for her dignity. She turned away from the counter, her eyes scanning the departure board, feeling utterly alone. And that's when she heard it. Vanessa Linwood. The voice was smooth, deep, and familiar. She turned to see Dominic Blackwood striding towards her, a warm, concerned smile on his face. Dominic Blackwood was the other half of Linwood and Blackwood Innovations. He was the CEO, the steady hand that guided the company's day-to-day operations, while Dominic played the role of the visionary rainmaker. Where Dominic was sharp angles and cool calculation, Dominic was broad shoulders and genuine warmth. He had a reputation for being fiercely intelligent, but also fair and approachable, respected by everyone from the mailroom clerk to the board members. He and Vanessa had always been friendly at company events, sharing easy conversations that were a welcome relief from the sycophantic chatter that usually surrounded Dominic. He looked impeccable as always in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than Vanessa's entire Parisian wardrobe. But it was the look in his eyes that stopped her, one of genuine shock and confusion. "Dominic," she said, forcing a smile that felt brittle. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," he said, his gaze flicking from her face to the economy boarding pass in her hand, then down to her swollen belly. His brow furrowed. "I'm heading to Paris for the Sustainable Architecture Conference. Dominic was supposed to join me, but he said he had to fly to Singapore for that emergency deal." Vanessa's heart skipped a beat. A conference. Not $100 million emergency. A simple conference. Yes, the Singapore deal, she managed to say the lie, tasting like ash in her mouth. He felt terrible he had to cancel our baby moon. Damien's eyes, a piercing shade of hazel, seemed to see right through her. He looked at the garish budget airline branding behind the check-in counter. He looked at the crumpled boarding pass again. He didn't say anything for a long moment, but his silence was more eloquent than any words of pity could have been. It was a silence filled with disbelief and a dawning unspoken anger on her behalf. "Vanessa," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Where is your luggage?" "I just checked it," she said, confused. "All right. Come with me." He gently took her elbow, his touch respectful but resolute. He guided her away from the economy check-in and towards the opposite side of the terminal, where the Air France first-class check-in was a serene oasis of calm. "Damien." "What are you doing?" she protested, flustered. "My flight?" "You're not taking that flight," he said, simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He led her to an elegant counter, staffed by a smiling agent in a chic uniform. "Bonjour, Monsieur Blackwood." The agent greeted him warmly, checking in for the 9 p.m. to Charles de Gaulle. "Yes, Marie," Damien replied. "And I need to add a passenger to my booking. Ms. Vanessa Linwood." He glanced at Vanessa. "Don't worry about your bag. I'll have my assistant coordinate with the other airline to have it transferred. It will be waiting for you in Paris." Vanessa was speechless. Her mind was reeling. "Damien, you can't. I can't accept." He turned to her, his expression serious. "Vanessa, there is a seat next to me in La Première. It is empty. You are 7 months pregnant with my business partner's child. There is zero reality in which I allow you to fly for 14 hours in a middle seat on a budget airline while I fly in a private suite. It's not happening. Please don't argue." There was no arrogance in his tone, only an unshakable decency that was so profoundly different from Dominic's dismissive cruelty. Tears pricked her eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. She gave a small, shaky nod. The check-in process took less than 2 minutes. Within 10, they were being personally escorted through a private security line and into the Air France lounge. It was a world away from the chaos of the main terminal. Soft lighting, plush velvet chairs, a quiet murmur of conversation. A waiter appeared, instantly offering champagne and canapés. "Sparkling water for me, please," Vanessa said quietly. Damien ordered the same. When the waiter left, he turned to her. "Are you all right?" She looked at him at the genuine concern etched on his face, and the dam of composure she had been so carefully maintaining finally broke. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. "No," she whispered, the confession hanging in the air. "I'm not." He didn't press her. He simply passed her a napkin and let the silence sit a comfortable, understanding quiet. He spoke about the conference, about a new building project in Brooklyn, about a funny thing his niece had said last week. He talked about anything and everything except Dominic, the economy ticket, and her tears. He was giving her space to breathe, and she had never been more grateful. Boarding the plane was another surreal experience. They were escorted on first before anyone else. The La Première cabin was not just a section of the plane. It was a private sanctuary. There were only 4 suites, each with a plush seat that converted into a full-sized bed, a personal wardrobe, a large screen, and curtains for complete privacy. It was more spacious and luxurious than some hotel room she'd stayed in. A flight attendant, all Parisian chic and warm smiles, led Vanessa to her suite. "Can I get you a pillow for your back? Madame Linwood. Perhaps an extra blanket, or some slippers." Vanessa was overwhelmed. "Yes, all of that would be lovely. Thank you." As the plane took off, a smooth, barely perceptible ascent. Damien leaned over from his adjacent suite. "Better than 24B, he asked, a gentle teasing in his voice. She let out a watery laugh. Just a little. The 14-hour flight passed in a dream. The flight attendants treated her like a queen. They brought her a specially prepared meal that accommodated her pregnancy cravings, non-alcoholic cocktails, and a selection of French pastries that tasted like heaven. When her ankles began to swell, they brought her a cushioned stool without her even having to ask. She and Damien talked for hours. For the first time in years, she felt like she was having a conversation with an equal, not being lectured to or managed. He asked about her passion for art history, a subject Dominic had always derided as a cute hobby. Damien listened intently, asking thoughtful questions, his eyes lighting up when she spoke about the Impressionists. She learned about him, too. About his childhood in Boston, his scholarship to MIT, the hard work and integrity that had propelled him to the top. He spoke of his partnership with Dominic with a careful, measured tone. "Dominic is brilliant," he said, choosing his words. "A true visionary. But he sees the world like a chessboard, all pieces and strategy. Sometimes he forgets the pieces are people." It was the closest he came to criticism, but it was a truth that resonated deep within Vanessa's soul. Halfway through the flight, exhausted but unable to sleep, she confessed her fears about the pregnancy. "The doctor said, I'm high risk, high blood pressure, some other complications. He told me to avoid stress. It's all I seem to feel lately." Damien's expression hardened, almost imperceptibly. Any decent doctor would tell you that a 14-hour flight crammed into an economy seat would be the dictionary definition of stress in your condition. He paused. "Dominic knows about your doctor's concerns." "I told him," she said, quietly. "He said I was being hysterical." Damien stared out the window at the endless expanse of dark ski and clouds, and a muscle in his jaw clenched. When he turned back to her, his face was calm, but his eyes held a fire she hadn't seen before. "Well, you're not hysterical. You're being rightly concerned for your health and your baby's health. From now on, you're not going to worry about a thing. I'm going to make sure of it." Later, as the cabin lights were dimmed, the flight attendant converted her seat into a lie-flat bed with a proper mattress duvet and pillows. As Vanessa lay down, cocooned in a level of comfort she hadn't thought possible on an airplane, she pulled the privacy curtain. But she didn't feel alone. For the first time in a very long time, she felt seen. She felt cared for. And as she drifted off to sleep high above the Atlantic, a terrifying and liberating thought entered her mind. The kindest, most caring man she had encountered in years was not her husband. It was his CEO. And they were both heading to Paris, a city of new beginnings. Paris greeted them not with the romantic grey mist Vanessa had imagined, but with a crisp, bright morning that seemed to promise clarity. The seamless transition through Charles de Gaulle Airport was another testament to the world Damien inhabited. A private escort met them at the jet bridge, whisked them through a diplomatic passport channel, and led them to a quiet lounge where their bags, including Vanessa's miraculously transferred suitcase, were already waiting. A black Mercedes S-Class was purring at the curb. "Where are we going?" Vanessa asked, as the driver held the door for her. The interior smelled of rich leather and quiet efficiency. "First to your hotel to get you settled," Damien said, sliding in beside her. "Then I have a call into a doctor, a friend of a friend. He's one of the best obstetricians in Paris. I want you to get checked out just to be safe after the stress of the past few days." Vanessa was taken aback. "A doctor, Damien? That's too much. You've already done more than enough." "Nonsense," he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "It's no trouble at all. Your hotel is the Hôtel de Crillon, right? Dominic mentioned he'd booked it." She nodded, a little embarrassed. The Crillon was one of Paris's most legendary palace hotels. Dominic had likely booked the smallest room, but the name still held weight. "Yes, that's it." The drive into the city was quiet. Vanessa watched the beautiful Haussmannian buildings glide by, feeling a strange sense of detachment. She was in her favorite city on a trip meant for romance, yet every part of the experience was being facilitated by a man who wasn't her husband. They pulled up to the magnificent neoclassical facade of the Hôtel de Crillon on the Place de la Concorde. Liveried doormen rushed to open their doors. But Damien didn't get out. He was on his phone. His brow furrowed in concentration. "That's odd," he murmured more to himself than to her. He looked at the head doorman. "Could you please confirm a reservation for Linwood?" The doorman spoke into his lapel. A moment later, he approached Damien's window with an apologetic expression. "I'm very sorry, monsieur, but we have no reservation under the name Linwood or Rosewood." Vanessa's blood ran cold. "What? That's impossible. Dominic said he booked it. Could you check again?" Damien insisted, his voice calm but firm. "For the last week, perhaps under a corporate booking for Linwood and Blackwood." The doorman was polite but firm. "I have checked every variation, monsieur. There is no booking. I am truly sorry." Humiliation washed over Vanessa in a hot, sickening wave. It was one thing to be sent economy class. It was another to be sent to Paris with the promise of a 5-star hotel, only to arrive and find out it was a lie. He hadn't just neglected to book a better flight. He hadn't booked a hotel at all. Had he expected her to land alone and pregnant and just figure it out? The cruelty of it was breathtaking. She shrank back into the leather seat, wishing she could disappear. She couldn't look at Damien, couldn't bear to see the pity in his eyes. But when she finally chanced a glance, she didn't see pity. She saw a quiet, controlled fury. His jaw was set like granite. He simply nodded at the doorman, picked up his phone, and made a call. "Antoine." "It's Damien Blackwood," he said, his French fluent and commanding. "I have an urgent last-minute request. I need your best suite." "Yes, immediately." "For a very important guest." He listened for a moment. "Excellent. We'll be there in 10 minutes. He hung up and turned to her, his face softening when he saw her distress. Change of plans. Dominic must have gotten his wires crossed. "We're going to the Four Seasons, George V." "Damien." "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. "This is too much. You can't just put me up in a suite at the George V. I can find another hotel." "A normal one, Vanessa," he said, and he reached over not to touch her, but just to hover his hand in the space between them, a gesture of reassurance. "This is no longer about what you will accept. This is about what is right. You are going to stay at the George V. You are going to see the best doctor in Paris, and you are going to let me take care of things. Please." She was too broken to argue. She simply nodded, a tear escaping and tracing a silent path down her cheek. The Four Seasons Hotel. George V. Was, if possible, even more opulent than the Crillon. The lobby was an explosion of magnificent floral arrangements by the famed Jeff Leatham. Within minutes, Vanessa was being personally escorted by the hotel manager to one of the premier suites overlooking the Eiffel Tower. It was larger than her first 2 New York apartments, combined with a separate living room, a marble bathroom the size of a small spa, and a private terrace. A bottle of non-alcoholic champagne was already chilling next to a tiered platter of macarons and fresh fruit. I don't know what to say," she stammered, standing in the middle of the living room, feeling like an imposter. "Say you'll rest," Damien said from the doorway. He had refused to even enter the suite, as if to maintain a respectful distance. "The doctor, Dr. Fournier, can see you at 4 this afternoon. His clinic is just a few blocks away. I'll come by at 3:30 to take you." He left her alone in the palatial suite. Vanessa walked onto the terrace and stared at the Eiffel Tower a symbol of romance that now felt like a cruel joke. The scale of Dominic's deception was beginning to settle in. This wasn't just neglect. This was a deliberate, calculated act of abandonment. He had sent his pregnant, high-risk wife across an ocean with no flight consideration, no hotel room, and no support. The question was no longer if he cared. The question was why he was being so malicious. At 4 o'clock, she found herself in the chic, calming waiting room of Dr. Fournier's private clinic. The doctor was a kind-faced man in his late 50s with a reassuring bedside manner. He listened patiently as Vanessa, with Damien translating the more technical terms, explained her doctor's diagnosis back in New York. He then performed a thorough examination, including a detailed ultrasound. He was quiet for a long time as he studied the screen. His brow furrowed. Finally, he turned to them, his expression serious. "Madame Lynwood, your doctor in New York was correct to be concerned," he said in heavily accented but clear English. "The marginal cord insertion is one thing, but your blood pressure is significantly elevated. I would even call it pre-hypertensive. Combined with the stress of a long-haul flight, you are at a considerable risk for developing preeclampsia, which can be very dangerous for both you and the baby," he continued. "The scans also show signs of uterine irritability. Frequent non-productive contractions. It's your body telling you it's under duress." He looked at her pointedly. "Under no circumstances should you get back on a plane for a 14-hour flight in an economy seat. It would be monumentally unwise. Honestly, I would advise against flying at all for at least a week until we can get your blood pressure stabilized." The doctor's words confirmed everything she had feared. Dominic hadn't just been inconsiderate. He had actively endangered her life. Back in the car, the weight of the doctor's verdict settled between them. So Damien said, breaking the silence, "That settles it. You're not flying home for a while." "What am I going to do?" Vanessa whispered. "I can't stay in that suite for a week. I can't let you pay for that." "It's already paid for," he said simply. "It's a corporate expense. Consider it a health and safety necessity." He shot her a small, wry smile. "Besides, it means I have a companion for the conference dinners." Over the next few days, a strange and comfortable routine developed. In the mornings, Damien would go to his conference. Vanessa would rest read or take short, gentle walks in the Tuileries garden. In the afternoons, he would return, and they would explore the city together. He didn't take her to the crowded, tourist-filled Louvre or up the Eiffel Tower. Instead, he took her to the Musée Marmottan-Monet, a small, quiet museum filled with the world's largest collection of Monet's works, knowing her love for the Impressionists. He took her to quiet family-run bistros in Le Marais, ordering for her in perfect French, ensuring her dietary needs were met. He showed her a side of Paris that was intimate, authentic, and breathtakingly beautiful. During their long conversations, she found herself opening up in a way she never had with Dominic. She told him about her dreams of opening a small art gallery, a dream Dominic had always scoffed at. Damien listened engaged and even offered practical advice. He made her feel intelligent, interesting, and worthy. The emotional intimacy growing between them was undeniable, yet Damien remained a perfect gentleman. He was protective but never possessive. He was attentive but never overbearing. He walked her to her suite door every evening, said a polite good night, and left. The line between them was never crossed yet. The connection felt deeper than any physical touch. The twist came on their 5th day in Paris. Damien had an all-day conference event, and Vanessa was in her suite browse on the tablet the hotel provided. She was logged into her email, deleting junk mail, when a new message popped up. The sender was J. Lynwood. Her heart leaped, thinking it was from Dominic. But the subject line was strange. FWD final notice. Blackwood portfolio. Curious, she opened it. It wasn't from her Dominic. The sender was Jonathan Lynwood, Dominic's estranged uncle, a man Dominic claimed was a disgrace to the family. And the email was a forwarded chain, a long, ugly history of correspondence between Jonathan and Dominic. Her eyes scanned the text, her breath catching in her throat. The words blurred, then sharpened into horrifying focus. Dominic, the most recent email from his uncle began, "You are a fool and a coward. You leveraged the entire company, everything your father and I built, against a single high-risk derivatives portfolio. I warned you. Damien warned you. But you were too arrogant to listen." Vanessa scrolled up her hand, shaking. There were older messages, more frantic ones. "The margin call is coming, Dominic. You're facing total insolvency. You've not just ruined yourself, you've wiped out the employee pension fund. You've destroyed hundreds of lives. Damien is trying to arrange a bailout, trying to salvage something for the employees, but you're fighting him at every turn." And then she saw the final damning email from Jonathan, dated the week before she left for Paris. "I know what you're planning. I spoke to your old friend from college. He told me about the insurance policy. The one you took out on Vanessa 6 months ago. A $25 million key person policy, but with a rider. A sick, twisted rider that pays out in the event of accidental death during travel, or fatal complications arising from childbirth. You're trying to solve your financial problem with her life and the life of your unborn child. You're not just a failure, Dominic. You're a monster. I am forwarding this entire chain to Damien. He needs to know what kind of snake he's dealing with." The tablet slipped from her numb fingers and clattered onto the floor. The room spun. The air, thick with the scent of expensive roses, became unbreathable. The economy ticket, the non-existent hotel, the dismissal of her high-risk pregnancy, the insistence she fly alone. It wasn't carelessness. It wasn't neglect. It wasn't a message of his displeasure. It was a murder attempt. A slow, deliberate, arm's-length attempt on her life and the life of their baby, disguised as a vacation. He wasn't trying to cause a miscarriage. He was trying to cause a fatal medical event, 35,000 feet in the air, far from any medical help. A tragic accident that would leave him a grieving widower with a $25 million windfall to solve the catastrophic financial ruin he had created. A sob, raw and guttural, ripped from her throat. She stumbled to the bathroom and was violently ill. Sinking to the cold marble floor, she wrapped her arms around her belly, her body shaking uncontrollably. The baby kicked a frantic, tiny flutter against her hand, as if it too could sense the pure evil of its father. She was still on the floor when Damien returned that evening, using his own keycard to enter after his knocks went unanswered. He found her there, pale and trembling, the tablet lying face down on the rug a few feet away. He rushed to her side, his face a mask of alarm. "Vanessa. What is it? What's wrong? Is it the baby?" She couldn't speak. She could only lift a shaking hand and point towards the tablet. Damien picked it up. He saw the open email chain. His face went pale as he read his expression, shifting from confusion to dawning horror, and finally to a look of such cold, absolute rage that it frightened her. He looked from the screen to her, huddled on the floor, and his fury was replaced by an expression of profound sorrow and self-recrimination. I knew, he said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. I didn't know this. Not the policy. My God. But I knew how bad the finances were. I knew he was desperate. I should have known he was capable of this. He knelt in front of her, his expensive suit forgotten on the marble floor. Vanessa, I am so sorry. In that moment, looking into his horrified, guilt-ridden eyes, she knew she wasn't alone in this nightmare. The battle lines had been drawn. It was no longer a collapsing marriage. It was a fight for survival. And the kind, decent man kneeling before her was the only ally she had. The discovery of Dominic's monstrous plot shifted the air in Paris. The remaining days were not spent in quiet exploration, but in strategic planning. The luxurious four-seasons suite transformed into a command center, a fortress against the evil lurking across the Atlantic. The beautiful view of the Eiffel Tower was no longer a romantic backdrop, but a silent witness to a brewing war. Vanessa moved through the initial hours in a state of shock, a zombie-like numbness enveloping her. Damien handled everything. He called Doctor Fournier, explaining there had been a significant shock and requested a house call. The kind doctor arrived within the hour, his professional calm a soothing balm on Vanessa's frayed nerves. He checked her blood pressure, monitored the baby, and administered a mild, pregnancy-safe sedative to help her rest. He spoke to her not as a patient, but as a woman who had survived something unthinkable. Your body is strong, madame, he said, holding her hand. And your baby is a fighter. You will both be well. While Vanessa rested, Damien was a whirlwind of focused energy. He was no longer just the kind, empathetic CEO. He was a formidable adversary, preparing for battle. He made a flurry of calls from the suite's living room, his voice low but steel-edged. He spoke to his lawyers in New York, to a private security firm, and to the members of the Linwood and Blackwood board he knew he could trust. Vanessa, drifting in and out of a sedated sleep, would catch snippets of the conversations. Complete asset freeze. Fiduciary duty breach. Presenting evidence to the board Monday morning. Full security detail for Ms. Linwood upon her return. 24/7. No expense spared. Contacting the New York State Department of Financial Services. The Insurance Fraud Division. He was building a case brick by painstaking brick. He was not just protecting her. He was systematically dismantling Dominic's entire world. Witnessing his quiet, lethal efficiency, Vanessa understood why he was the CEO. He saw every angle, anticipated every move. He was playing chess just as Dominic did, but his goal wasn't personal gain. It was justice. By the next morning, the fog of shock had begun to lift, replaced by a cold, hard anger. The fear was still there, a chilling presence in the pit of her stomach, but it was now fuel. The woman who had cried over an economy ticket was gone. In her place was a survivor, a mother protecting her child. She found Damien on the terrace, a tablet in his hand, a grim expression on his face as he looked out at the waking city. He called, Damien said without turning. Dominic. Left me a voicemail. He's back from Singapore. He's furious the deal apparently fell through. He wants to know why I'm not answering his calls. He said, and I quote, "My wife is probably driving you crazy. Feel free to put her on the next flight home. Coach will do." A wave of nausea hit Vanessa, but she swallowed it down. When are we going back? Damien turned to face her. My jet is on standby. We can leave whenever you feel ready. The lawyers are prepared. The security team is in place. We have everything we need. I want to go back now, she said, her voice steady. And I want to be the one to face him. Damien studied her, his hazel eyes searching hers. Vanessa, you don't have to. The lawyers can handle everything. You never have to see him again. I know. She walked to the railing, placing a protective hand on her belly. But if I don't do this, he will have taken one more thing from me, my strength. I walked out of that penthouse feeling weak and worthless. I'm not walking back in that way. He needs to see me. He needs to see that he failed. I need to be the one to watch his world burn down. A slow smile of admiration touched Damien's lips. All right, he said. Then that's what we'll do. The flight back to New York was the antithesis of her journey out. They flew on a private Gulfstream G650 that Damien had chartered. It was a vessel of quiet purpose, slicing through the sky towards the inevitable confrontation. They barely spoke, but the silence was one of solidarity. They spent the time reviewing the plan with Damien's lead attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Clara, via a secure video link. The plan was audacious and brilliant. They wouldn't confront Dominic at home. That was his territory, his cage. They would do it in the one place he believed he was king, his office. The Linwood and Blackwood boardroom on the 50th floor of their gleaming skyscraper in Midtown. And they wouldn't do it alone. Damien had called an emergency board meeting for the following morning. They landed at a private airfield in Teterboro, New Jersey, where 2 black SUVs were waiting on the tarmac. The men who got out were not drivers. They were security. Quiet, professional, and built like mountains. Vanessa felt a pang of fear at the necessity of it all, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of security she hadn't felt in years. They did not take her to the penthouse she had shared with Dominic. Damien had arranged for her to stay in a private, unlisted residence owned by his family on the Upper West Side, a beautiful brownstone with a private garden already staffed with a housekeeper and a chef. You'll be safe here, Damien said, as her security detail swept the house. No one knows this address. That night, Vanessa couldn't sleep. She sat in the window of her new temporary bedroom, looking out at the quiet street. She thought of the woman she had been just a week ago, a woman who measured her worth by her husband's moods and the price tag on his gifts. She had been a passenger in her own life. Now she was taking the wheel. The next morning, Vanessa dressed with methodical care. She chose not a soft, forgiving maternity dress, but a sharply tailored black pantsuit that fit her pregnant form perfectly. It was a suit of armor. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. Her makeup was minimal but immaculate. When she met Damien in the foyer, he was already dressed in a dark charcoal suit, his expression grimly determined. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready?" she replied, her voice unwavering. The ride to the Linwood and Blackwood building was tense. They entered through a private underground garage, bypassing the main lobby. They were met by the head of building security, who was loyal to Damien, and escorted to a private elevator. When the doors opened on the 50th floor, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The executive assistants spoke in hushed tones, stealing nervous glances at them. The boardroom was a magnificent space with a wall of glass offering a panoramic view of the city. The long, polished mahogany table was already occupied by the 7 other members of the board. They were a collection of powerful, serious-looking men and women who looked up in surprise as Vanessa entered alongside Damien. They had clearly been expecting him, but not her. Damien took his seat at the head of the table. A chair had been placed for Vanessa to his right. She sat down, her back ramrod straight, and placed her hands on the table in front of her. She ignored the curious stares. Precisely at 9 a.m., the boardroom doors opened and Dominic strode in. He was smiling, exuding his usual brand of confident arrogance. He was clearly expecting to walk in and manage a crisis of his own making, to charm and bully the board, as he always did. His smile froze when he saw Vanessa. It was a perfect, cinematic moment of shock. His eyes widened, his face paled, and for a split second he looked like a cornered animal. He recovered quickly, his shock morphing into rage. "Vanessa," he said, his voice a low growl. "What the hell are you doing here? This is a private meeting." He shot a venomous look at Damien. "What is this Blackwood?" "Some kind of pathetic stunt." Damien didn't respond. He simply looked at Vanessa and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. It was her stage. Vanessa drew a deep, steadying breath. She looked directly at her husband, the man who had tried to murder her, and she felt nothing but a cold, empty pity. "Hello, Dominic," she said, her voice clear and carrying across the silent room. "I hope you had a productive trip to Singapore. I, on the other hand, had a very illuminating time in Paris." Dominic's eyes darted around the table at the stony faces of the board members. He was losing control, and he knew it. "This is not the time or the place for this. We can discuss your little Parisian holiday at home." "There's nothing to discuss," Vanessa said, her voice dropping, becoming more intimate, more chilling. "Because I know everything." "I don't know what you're talking about," he blustered, but a bead of sweat was trickling down his temple. "Don't you?" Vanessa leaned forward slightly. "Let me refresh your memory. Let's talk about the company's insolvency, the leveraged portfolio that crashed and burned. Let's talk about the employee pension funds you gambled away." The board members began to murmur, looking at each other, then at Dominic with dawning horror. "This is slander!" Dominic roared, slamming his hand on the table. "Lies concocted by him," he jabbed a finger at Damien. Is it Vanessa's voice remained icily calm. She gestured to a large monitor on the wall. "Damien, would you mind?" Damien tapped his tablet. The screen flickered to life, displaying the email chain between Dominic and his Uncle Jonathan. The subject line was visible to everyone. Final notice. Blackwood portfolio. Vanessa narrated as if she were presenting a boring quarterly report. "And here we have your Uncle Jonathan detailing your financial ruin. He seems quite concerned." She paused as Damien scrolled down. "And, here is my favorite part. The part where he mentions the insurance policy." She let the words hang in the air. You could have heard a pin drop. Dominic looked as if he had been physically struck. "A $25 million key person policy on me." Vanessa continued, her gaze locked on his. "With a very special rider. Payout upon accidental death during travel, or fatal complications arising from childbirth." What a coincidence. You send me your high-risk pregnant wife on a 14-hour flight in a middle seat. You don't even bother to book a hotel. Were you hoping for a tragic accident? Dominic. A fatal medical emergency at 35,000 feet. Was that your plan B to cover your catastrophic failures? Dominic opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was completely exposed, his monstrous narcissism laid bare for all to see. Damien finally spoke, his voice resonating with cold authority. "The New York State Department of Financial Services has already opened an investigation into the insurance policy, Dominic. And our lawyers have filed a petition for your immediate removal as chairman on grounds of gross negligence, fraud, and endangerment. The board has already seen the evidence. They are here to vote, but I think we all know how that vote will go. One by one, the board members turned their backs on Dominic, their faces masks of contempt. His allies, his sycophants, all gone. Vanessa stood up, her part in the proceedings over. She had faced her monster and won. She looked at Dominic one last time, a man utterly destroyed by his own greed and cruelty. He looked small, pathetic. "By the way, Dominic," she said, her voice clear and strong, "I've also spoken to my lawyer. She'll be serving you with divorce papers this afternoon. I'll be seeking full custody, of course. You will never, ever be alone with my child." Without another glance, she turned and walked out of the boardroom, her head held high. Damien followed a moment later, leaving the board to formally execute the man who had already executed himself. As the elevator doors closed, sealing her off from that chapter of her life. Forever. Vanessa placed a hand on her belly. She felt the baby kick a strong, steady rhythm. It was a kick of life, of promise, of a future she had claimed back for them both. The war was over. The rebuilding was about to begin. In the end, Dominic Lynwood's empire didn't just collapse, it was erased. Faced with overwhelming evidence of insurance fraud and embezzlement, he was utterly ruined, trading his boardroom for a prison cell. Vanessa, however, flourished. Free from her gilded cage, she gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl named Hope. Years later, she realized her own dream by opening the Rosewood Gallery, a celebrated Soho space dedicated to emerging female artists. Damien Blackwood remained a steady, supportive presence in her life, their relationship evolving slowly and organically into a profound partnership built on deep respect and integrity. Vanessa had learned the hardest way that a person's true worth isn't measured in millions, but in their character. She boarded a flight to Paris as a victim and returned as the master of her own story. Her journey is a powerful testament to resilience and the courage it takes to reclaim one's life. If this story of survival and unexpected salvation resonated with you, please take a moment to show your support. Hit that like button to let us know you enjoyed it, and share this video with someone who loves a story of strength overcoming deception. For more gripping tales like Vanessa's, make sure you subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support is what allows us to keep telling these stories. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of Dominic's monstrous plan? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for listening.